Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not To Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of The Walking Dead World Beyond. A great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Honestly, it's so interesting because obviously you've spent so long in this world that it feels weird for this to be the starting point. Because even if you compare like this to the Fear the Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead pretty much started like The Walking Dead did. Obviously, I'm not that well versed in Fear the Walking Dead because I haven't seen any of it. I've seen bits and pieces, but to my understanding, it starts off with like The Walking Dead, where it's like, oh, and just like that's kind of like you're in the middle of things kind of going down, and it seems like this show, at least parts of the stories, will kind of deal with things going down. It's actually interesting too because I don't know if prior to this they've ever really contextualized like how long this, the world's been like this, and it has been like 10 years, because 10 years is when everything kind of went wrong for them. But it also makes sense because it's like, well, Judith was born like in season 3, and it obviously, but the thing is, like, when there's been time skips, they've never really specified a lot of times like how long it's necessarily been. But when you look at Judith's age, that kind of gives you more of a context of just like how long. I mean, granted, it's been going on a little bit longer than she's been alive, but even then we don't know the ins and outs of how long it was in between season 1 and season 2. Like, obviously enough for like Lori to start showing in between season 2 and 3. Regardless, tangents and all that. But it's just interesting, like, we see like it seems so normal and it's so weird, especially like I said, because it starts off making you almost feel like, oh, everything is fine, but it's like, no, this is the middle of the apocalypse. But obviously it's just like, this is a community that's maintained some of its normality, and it's at a school and everything, so that's interesting. Obviously we get introduced to like our main characters. We get introduced to Iris, her sister Hope, and we learn about their situation, because obviously they're going on a bus to meet somebody, and her sister Hope sneaks aboard, and it's like, what's this whole thing about? Well, it turns out they're meeting this group known as the Civic Republic, and it's like, okay, so who the hell are you people? They're like another group, but it's a group that has access to a helicopter. It's like, now who the hell are you? Because I think this is a new story. I don't think this necessarily has any connection to any of the... I mean, overarching, it's the same universe, I haven't watched the Walking Dead quote-unquote season finale, so I don't know if there's going to be any tie-in in any shape or form in that regard. But I'm assuming that this has to be like, they have to, for them to be as well equipped as they are. I mean, maybe they are just some like random militia or something, but it seems like you have to know something's up. Like, to have access to helicopters and stuff. Like, it seems like the group that Jadis was a part of, like, remember she contacted them, so it seems like it's got to be the same group. I don't know if they've popped up in Fear the Walking Dead or not. I think they have. Once again, I haven't seen it in Fear the Walking Dead, because we haven't seen them back in the story for a long time, because I know that's going to deal with like Rick's side of story in the movies and stuff like that. But I'm assuming they have something to do with that group. But it turns out, like, obviously this community is kind of in like a 3-way alliance with like Portland and the Civic Republic. But what was interesting though is that the reason why just no one knows where they're from, because it's like they've made sure to keep their anonymity, in the sense of you don't know where we're from, which I guess it makes sense in the grand scheme of things. With everything that goes down, you can't really trust people 100% of the time, because it's like the last thing you want. I mean, because obviously that's something even in the the main show, like obviously Eugene, and I'm blanking on her name, the lady that Eugene was talking to over the radio and everything. Last thing you want is to tell people, because you never know if you can really 100% trust a group or not. But so it makes sense in certain regards, but it's just like, obviously you're well equipped, just like your people are in like tactical armor and stuff like that, so it's like you're well equipped and stuff like that. But obviously it's like they're trying to mediate the peace between the 3 different groups and stuff like that, because basically we find out that Iris and Hope's dad, Leo, went as a scientist, kind of like as a bargaining chip. It's like, you help us out, we help you out, type of thing. So it's like their dad is a super smart scientist, so he's working on a cure, which is so interesting that for such a long time has not really been a thing. At least in the main show, hasn't been a thing for a long time. The last time it was a thing was when Eugene was lying about making a cure, because obviously, like, from the very beginning of the series, they kind of made it clear, like, there is no cure. It is what it is, and obviously Rick learned and didn't. It's a whole thing. Like, obviously it's been a long time and everything, but it's just like, it's so interesting, like, that at this point in time, after 10 years, that people are still working on. I mean, I think that's kind of the interesting thing about this universe is like there are people scattered around, because I know like obviously the main show takes place in Georgia. I mean, at least that's where they film. I believe, I could be mistaken, at least where it started, I believe Fear the Walking Dead started in California. I don't know if they're still there. I'd assume they are, but I don't know. And so it's just interesting, like obviously giving us, because obviously like we see like Iris's like drawing at one point in time, and it has like the it has their location, and then it has like the Civic Republic being somewhere, and then there's so many places like question marks all over the map because they don't know the full. I mean, to be fair, there's not like a full-blown national communication, so it's not like you know what's up with everybody, you know. So I think that's such an interesting insight that I feel like, because obviously the core groups like in the Walking Dead just stay with themselves, so like the outside world is like you come across survivors like in the grand scale of things. It comes up from time to time, but it's never the biggest main focus. I think the most like reality being like, whoa, thing was when that satellite fell. Wasn't that last season? Or was that this season? It was this season, because it was during that time when Alpha had already made her claims of like, don't cross into our boundaries. So it was definitely this season. So like that's like the most like outside world shit going down type of thing. I mean, I guess there's a little bit of the whole thing where, like, the last time we saw Michonne, like, where things kind of ended up with her. That's kind of another example. But you get what I'm trying to say, like, it all seems isolated with the groups. It's never, like, as worldwide. And I think this is obviously supposed to be a step in that direction of giving you a bigger scale of the world. I mean, it's from the perspective of the characters wanting to see the world, because they were so young when everything went to shit that, they don't really remember the world prior to everything going wrong. What they refer to as Monument Day is the day that everything changed for them, you know? And so I think it's just an interesting approach to this whole situation. Obviously, like, Hope had snuck aboard the bus and everything to visit her mom's grave, and then she's giving, like, Elizabeth the finger, but now we kind of understand why, because it's like, well, you took our dad, and we haven't been in direct communications. There's been a secret, like, channel where he'll, like, send messages to them in that cabinet, like, and everything. They have they receive the messages there, but obviously it's, like, a top secret that only them and Felix is aware of, because Felix is a family friend. His boyfriend Will is part of Leo's personal security detail, and obviously, like, for Felix, he misses Will, but it's still just a thing of like, he wants to keep faith and try to hold it together, because obviously his duty is looking after Leo's kids. He was kind of they were put in his responsibility, so he has to to be responsible for. And I think it's such an interesting introduction to, like, Iris and Hope, them kind of being these opposites to each other, because Iris is all about kind of putting other people before herself. And obviously she's in her therapy session with her Dr. K about it. And it's so interesting because that reminds me of, I'm blanking because it's been so long, the original mayor of Alexandria. Like, she would talk to people and videotape them and stuff like that if they were going to be part of the community and everything. It reminds me a little bit of that to a certain extent. But Dr. K was talking about, because obviously for Iris, she's been having nightmares, and she's really not 100% sure what they stem from, but it's something she hasn't really talked to her sister about, because her sister is super against the Civic Republic, because she doesn't trust them. They took our dad. We don't really know where they came from. We don't really know this group, and we're supposed to just be welcoming them with open arms. I'm supposed to welcome them open arms. Bump that, So it seems like Iris, it seems like she's the more responsible type. Like, I'm going to take care of everything and everyone. Whereas Hope is just kind of like, she seems like the rebel child, type of situation. But it's shown that obviously she's super smart in her own right, because she was able to make her own alcohol, which is interesting. So, like I said, Iris is more the rule follower. She's more the rule breaker. But we kind of finally understand why that is. Because, like, Iris, her need to protect everyone is because she blames herself for what happened. Like, her mom dying, she blames herself because she's like, I got scared when, what they refer, because obviously everyone's got their own names for walkers. Obviously, they call them the empties. when they ran into empties, she got scared. I mean, to be fair, you were a little girl, you know, it's a terrifying situation going on, and she got separated from Hope and their mom died when she was with Hope. And it's like Hope saw that, and so Iris has basically been blaming herself ever since. Like, you should have never had to go through that alone. I failed you as a sister. So it's like she's like to almost make up for that. She's kind of taking this personal responsibility of everyone else. It's like, you know, the doctor was saying, like, you need to kind of just, you know, this whole dream could be about yourself dying, in a sense that you're losing yourself. You're losing you. Because you're so concerned about everyone else's, you're so far up the future's ass, you're not there just taking care of yourself, living your own life. Basically, just don't live for others. Don't strive so hard to be perfect for others. Just be for yourself. Figure out who you are, what you want. You know, because obviously for Dr. K, she's like, I'm sick. I kind of let my life pass me by. You don't want to be in a situation like me when you're older, and you realize that life passed you by and it's kind of too late to really do anything about it, you know? So, and on the topic of Hope, it's actually kind of interesting. The conversation she had with Huck, I thought was kind of interesting. Because, like, she's like, because Huck is like, yeah, I like it here. She's like, well, you don't want to go to, like, you don't never talk about the big city. She's like, I actually like it here. She's like, what are you talking about? The fact that, you know, Hope was like, the city's 10 times bigger than this. It's the thing of, like, when this has kind of been all you've known, this is your world for the past 10 years, you want to go out there and see the world. Because for her, it's like, the work, for her, because obviously, you know, and Iris had said this in, like, her monologue and stuff, it was like, about the fact of the matter is, there are people who are going to flow two different ways about it. People who want to do the best that they can in this world, who want to build it back up, to make something new in this world, to bring some version of the old world back. And there are people like Hope who just given up hope, that they think that the world is going to end, that it's never going to go back to being what it is, that what it is now is where it is, and any attempt to rebuild anything is just false hope, that it's all going to get burned down to the ground, that basically it's all going to come to an end again anyway. So she comes at it from a very pessimistic view. And it's like, she also says, like, it's not even the empties, it's people. And it's like, you know, because in this world you kind of learn that people can't necessarily be trustworthy. And it's interesting when we learn the insight into why she thinks that way. Because when she was with her mom, it was like, because obviously they were going through the plane and everything. And so I was like, it was something going to happen here, but then it cut away, and then we cut back. They're heading towards the truck that was nearby, and the pregnant lady they had run into earlier had pulled a gun on them. And obviously she's like, no, like, you know, me and my daughter, it's like, no, like, she's like, I got to go get my family. But she's like, okay, my husband, my other daughter that could be right behind, if we could all go together. And she's like, no, I just don't have the time. And obviously, like, Hope, you know, was screaming, and the lady just panicked and pulled the trigger, killing her mom. It was an accident, but you can tell in that moment why Hope would be so, like, very, like, screw humans, like, people suck. You know, that was a moment where things were going bad, but you can make the argument maybe they were at their worst, or maybe they're at their worst now. Whatever the case may be, it's like, it was a human that killed her mom, because she never really, I don't think Hope ever explained what happened, you know, about it. Because the whole conversation was, you know, her telling Iris, I'm glad you weren't there to see it. You didn't see any of it. Because it turns out Hope killed that woman, because it was also kind of an accident. She was picking up the gun. She was obviously angry, but then, like, the explosion nearby scared her, and she pulled the trigger. So she killed that woman and her baby. And it's like, and it turns out the little marble thing she has around her neck, like, that's from that lady. So I think it's a constant reminder of, like, I don't think she wants to, for one, it's like, it's the last memory she has of her mom. So it's almost like you don't want to let go of that because you don't want to forget your mom. But also, a reminder of what you did. That maybe it's not just, you know, a reminder of what people are capable of, and also what she's capable of, you know? So just as much as Iris hasn't really talked to Hope about a lot of stuff, Hope hasn't talked to Iris about a lot either. So I think maybe the reason why she is the way she is like, you know, just not even just, you know, her perspective in that thing. I think it's just like maybe her being kind of pessimistic as she is in general just kind of all stems from that, why she's kind of the rule breaker that she is, why she's so quick to believe, oh, we're going to be going, because she saw 2 lives extinguished like that. You know, it's like, you know, especially with the way this world is, it could all be over in an instant. So there's no guarantee that we'll survive, that we'll be able to build anything up. Once again, she has a very pessimistic point of view, and you can kind of understand why, considering everything she had been through. But obviously, Hope and Iris got messages from their dad being like, it's not secure here. Even at one point, it's like, things have gotten bad. Don't even tell Felix about this. I love you. And obviously, Elizabeth tried to make them feel better because it's like, oh, I'm going to tell you something. I probably could get in trouble for it. Here, this is the map. Your dad's actually in New York. I can't give you specific locations, but if you showed them this, I could actually go to jail for giving you this classified information. So it's like she's trying to make them, it's like for her, it's like, you two are so smart, and the fact of the matter is we got to work together because this is for the future. But, after losing Dr. K, because that was the one person she could talk to, I think, it put things in perspective of Iris. All this stuff with their dad, Felix saying, like, there's nothing they can do right now because they can't let, because they're not supposed to have contact with him. He's not supposed to have contact with them. So it's, Leo isn't so... To let them know that that's been happening, that could turn it into a whole complicated thing of like continuing this peace between the the alliance and everything. So, and obviously they're worried about their dad, but there's not much they can do. They were drinking to kind of deal with everything, but then like obviously learn all that on top of like the one person she was talking to, Dr. K, ended up dying and becoming one. And so like obviously also like the clinicalness of how they handled it, because obviously a team comes over, they handle it, and it's like, oh, it's sad because of one person you talk to. But like I said, she was just telling you about living your life, and now that she's gone, I think it kind of started a lot of that for Iris. So for her, she even admits to Elizabeth, when she's giving her a speech, it's like she talks about the nightmares she had and everything, and she talks about the fact of the matter is that she's kind of wanting to live for now, to see, kind of not for other people, to kind of see, it's like we're so focused on the future, there is the now, just live now, Instead of being so far ahead that you focus so far on the future, you don't live in the present. But it's like, I don't trust you. We don't know anything about you guys, So that's the complicated nature of this whole deal and situation they got going on. So Iris, says that they're going to go out there and find their dad themselves, because if they don't, no one else will. Because Felix is going to stop them if they, try to get him involved in this. They know that, they know at the very least that he will tag along if they kind of forces him by going out and him having to follow after. So they decided they want to do this, but they can't do it alone. And obviously Elton and Silas get involved, which obviously we still don't know much about Silas, because Silas's reason for coming along is for him, it's like, I don't want to be viewed the way people view me. Because obviously, like, you've heard whispers of people being like, oh, did you hear about what he did in Omaha? So it's a thing of, like, obviously there's rumors and probably whispers about what he did beforehand, like, in what context and what that's all about. We don't know. But for him, it's probably the thing of, like, people look at me a certain way here. I don't want to be what people think I am, So he wanted to leave too. And for Elton, he wants to see the world. Kind of a similar view as Hope, where it's like, I want to see the world before it's gone, It's like he wants to see what the world's become, all that's out there. Once again, you've been kind of hidden behind these walls. You've lived your certain life for so long. You forgot, you're young. You've grown as people who don't really, they were young at the time, so they don't really remember the previous world. This world is kind of all they have, so it's like, I want to see what it's become. I want to see it myself, So that's why he wants to come along. But then we get the reveal that, because obviously he had talked about it earlier, that he was missing something, and that's why he would constantly sneak out, because he's looking for something. And it turns out he was looking for a piece of like was it a Triceratops horn? And it turns out he was like, yeah, his mom died, and we find out like the woman Hope shot was his mom. Now that's why I'm curious, because a thing that's around Hope's neck, and once he sees it, he'll be like, wait, where'd you get that? She's like, what are you talking about? It's like, that's my mom, and it's going to put things in perspective, because it's like, now it's going to be that complicated thing of, you're rolling with the person that killed your mom. He doesn't know the ins and outs about everything that happened, and it's like, it was an accident, she was a little girl, but it's still a thing of like, that was your mom that was taken from you, but to be fair, your mom took her mom from her, so it's like, it was a sucky situation that left them both without their mothers, And once again, Iris is still kind of in the dark about all of that, so what that kind of means for all of them in the grand scheme of things is going to be interesting to see how this story develops when that eventually, because it will come out, because that's just, storytelling for that. It's just, the question is, under what circumstances is all that going to come out? So obviously Felix and Huck go like, all right, we got to go after them. But it turns out they were lucky to leave when they did, because it turns out the Civic Republic, we come back to the school and everything, and like there's a whole bunch of dead bodies, both the living and just the straight up dead who broke their way through, and obviously they're going around killing everybody, and it's like, okay, so your whole plan was to wipe this group out. Like, who are you and what are you planning? Like, why'd you do all this? Was the point of getting the alliance was so that you could get the people you need, and then when the time comes, wipe them out and take all that they have? I mean, maybe that's how they've survived this entire time. Maybe not. I don't know. But it's like, why did you do that? Because remember, because they talk about early in the episode where we have Huck and Felix are tagging some of the empties, and we see some of those same empties there. So it's like, were you doing a little bit of a similar situation to the Whisperers, where you're gathering, like keeping in touch, like where a lot of them, like why were you doing that? Like, why'd you let that situation happen? I also think it's interesting, aside from the like 6 characters they focused on us getting to really know, aside from Dr. K, who ended up dying in an episode, but the other, like obviously Silas, Iris, Hope, and Elton, and Huck, and Felix, everyone else in that town looks like they're dead. So it's like, oh, we can't find her anywhere, and Elizabeth says, good. So part of me was wondering, it's like, was that why you actually gave her the map? You wanted her to kind of finally go, because you know them, you're like, oh, you're just like your dad, so she probably knew exactly what, given enough time, what would happen, would trigger her to want to go out on her own. So you're leading her down a path where it's like, oh, like, we don't have to worry about it. I know exactly where she is and where she's going, that she's going to New York to find her dad, and that's exactly where you want her to be. Because of her mind, it's like she's the scientist you need in the long run. So these 6 might be the only survivors of this world, that this place that they've known for so long, for it to all kind of be gone. Because, which is so sad, too, because obviously this is like Monument Day and everything. It was all about the fact is, remembering all that they've lost, all of who they've lost, and how you got to continue on for those who can no longer continue on, who aren't here to continue on. So it's interesting. I find that so fascinating too, because like, at least with obviously with the original show, like, you never started it immediately with an immediate antagonist. The antagonist was the dead. This time, there's actually people that... to be fair, once again, this show is structured differently, because we're not starting from the beginning. We're starting in the middle, with this show in comparison to, the others. So I just think that's kind of interesting. But for you to have this bad guy, this group that you're like, what their whole deal is, why they just wiped out an entire town full of people, because like there was like 9,000 and 9,000 and some people there. It's like, what was that all for then? What were you doing? What were you planning? Because I don't see that as like some accident of like, oh, like, because obviously the town has been fined prior to now, so why wouldn't it be? Like, why did you do what you did? Hopefully we get answers soon enough. This episode also answered a question I had too, wondering whether or not, like, in the promotional material, they had that very, like, artistic, like, you see, like, the drawings on top of stuff. Like, it starts off as drawings, and then it fades into live action. And obviously, during Iris's nightmares, you saw, like if someone, like, drew on top of, like, the walkers, like, you saw that aesthetic. Like, I was curious whether that was just for the promotional material or the show. And it seems like it's an aesthetic for the show, because it seems like that's more so pulling from Iris. Like, I think, because I think we're kind of getting a lot of this story, at least their adventures, her thought process about everything. We're kind of getting that perspective in that form, because she's a very artsy person. So I think that's what that aesthetic is kind of stemming from. But regardless, like I said, these are my thoughts about it. I'm curious to see where all this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.